Pakistan is a resilient country. We are the fifth most populous country in the world. And it is in adversity, that we show our true mettle. Fast forward to last year, has been a different kind of a roller coaster. And the underpinnings have less, in my opinion, to do with economies than continuity of policies, stability of policies. And I think if there are lessons from 2023 that we take away and we take forward, it's more about change is good, change is important, but abrupt change equals shocks. So there were quite a few potholes last year that we navigated as a country, which not necessarily have to do with the banking sector or economics. But the impact of those dramatically came on the economy, on the financial sector, and on the finances of the population at large. And those are elements where, again, where a country that performs relatively better than others in times of crisis, because this is nothing new to us. So there was a response, and you saw the impact, for example, on the FX side, you saw the impact on the import side. So you saw that being effectively managed. You saw, despite all the challenges, exports, while not increasing dramatically, at least slightly being up at around 6%. So we continue to have some of those revenue streams. Remittances continued, workers' remittances and some of the core remittances continued. Hot money moved out, right? So there were impacts that happened. And if there is any good news in all of this, the good news is two things. One, we've come out of it. So we're in 2024, and we're in a much better position today than we were in 2023. We have to now stop thinking about, IMF agendas. We have to start thinking about and understanding, is this an IMF agenda? Is this a Pakistan agenda to fundamentally reposition? So fast forward to this year, I think you see, the headline inflation now coming down. What everyone is looking at is the creation of fiscal space in order to reposition the economy. As long as our GDP growth, which was incidentally pretty much flat last year, 0.3%, it's flat considering elements, that's not a good show. But this year, I think we're looking at more 2 to 3%, underpinned by some good results out of the agricultural sector as well. Essentially, people are looking for that fiscal space to move from GDP growth, which is import-led, and a lot of the consumerism, and is really export-driven. That presents, interesting opportunities in terms of how that transition takes place. What kind of retooling is required? What kind of measures that we need to take, on the fiscal side as well, to enable us to be competitive in the international environment, right? And those are elements that we need to think through. There are certain areas where there's significant opportunity for us to ramp up, particularly technology exports. But at the same time, you talked about earlier, there are some short-term and medium-term measures. The medium-term measure that we need to do on a war footing is make sure that we've got enough people graduating with the right kind of skill sets. There is string beans, right? So they're on the other side of the equator, counter-cyclical to the bean production in Great Britain. And so they do this farming for financial inclusion. They have a factory which collects it. It employs about 1,200 female workers. There is a daycare where small children of those working can be there. Lunch break, they can go visit them as well. They get nourishing meals over there as well. And at the same time, this productivity is going on. So these are hand-picked. They are packaged there. They are labeled there. They are put in containers that are waiting. They're shipped to Mombasa from Nairobi, and they're shipped on to Europe. And on the supermarket shelves, they go for 9x. So that is the value when we talk about, where is the value in the value chain. And if you capture that value chain within the country in Pakistan, just like that value chain is getting captured in Kenya, the margins automatically improve. The remittances or the inward proceeds of those exports also goes up exponentially. The unfortunate part is because we don't align policies, we have far more capacity to produce the raw material, than to do the finished products. So this optimization of the value chains, I think, is also going to become much, much more important, as we go along. Roughly 50 to 60%, is either agri or industries which are built on top of agri. Realizing that the farmers that we deal with simply don't have access to many different things is where we piloted for the last couple of years with some agricultural interventions with a view to provide access to farmers to the right tools, equipment, and more importantly, knowledge base that they can increase their productivity, increase their revenue streams, increase the output for Pakistan. Remember, we are the 5th most populous country, yet right now at times we are challenged with food security. So it is a critical imperative for us to take this agenda forward. So one of the challenges that we have with the land reforms post-partition, a lot of the large land holdings gradually were broken up. And then within that, as multi-generation changes happened, by laws of inheritance, it got split. So the challenge with some of the mechanization that takes place is that the sizes of those land holdings are now so small, it's not viable to do seeders and thrashers and all of that. Because, moving a thresher from one location, to 50 kilometers down the road could cost you 30,000-40,000 rupees, right? So there is a significant cost. And therefore, if we put up these DERAs, and if other partners join in, and industry members, and put up either DERAs or equivalents or do something different, that 90%, which is right now in the informal sector, where the productivity is low, where what the farmer gets in the end is next to nothing, we can solve that problem collectively. I think it's somewhere north of 50% of our population is under 30 years of age, right? That's a huge number. And in a world where, many of the developed and affluent economies are actually experiencing negative birth rates, aging populations, they're having trouble finding the right workforce to support. Unfortunately, this is at times an opportunity, and it can also be an albatross, right? So it can also be an impediment. So if we educate them right, and the education, because today's even manual workforce in developed countries requires familiarity with automated tools, requires basic understanding of languages to understand operating manuals. There's a lot of computer-aided equipment which is there in different industries. So we need to medium term also revive the technical schools at one time that we used to have, So we actually graduate people with the right skill sets that are required. So I think one of the things that from a capacity building perspective we need to look at is developing the right educational curriculums that will allow for gainful employment in all categories, right from software engineers and architects, right down to basic labor. And Pakistan can play a very important role, and these can be your worker remittances of the future. And these are the other supply chains that were there. The government need for borrowing is likely to become less, right? So as that becomes less, you will have to transform your business models. So the investments that today people shy away from in these areas is because there is an easy way out. By the time it becomes difficult, it will be too late to reposition your business model. It takes time. When we look at some of the good work that the central bank is doing in terms of the payments backbones, in terms of the interoperability, that is now getting introduced and that is being built on top of, the rails which have already been raised, for example, in RAST, and now how we're going to take it forward, how some of the leading world-class examples, have leapfrogged from, a $300-400 POS machine, to a QR code which is printed on a scrap of paper on a rickshaw, so those are great examples of how we can actually go and how quickly our current payment system is going to get disrupted. So if there are other institutions relying on the fees and income off of moving funds, that is going to get commoditized, that is going to get white labeled. So how do you build your business model after that is gone? And there are interesting examples of other economies where these transformations have taken place, and yet not banks continue to survive, but banks continue to thrive. But that is the general thought, that we live in a world which is changing very, very rapidly. In this, business models are being created and business models are being disrupted. We cannot expect Pakistan to become what we've talked about and where it needs to go unless we take the entire population along, which includes gender diversity, which includes our female partners, colleagues, and fellow countrymen. It's not about equality, it's about equity. And there's a huge difference between the two, right? So if you're 6 foot tall and someone is 3 foot tall and you're on a level field, which one is taller? So you're being equal because both are on a level field. But if you bump the other one up 3 feet, then there's equity. It's not equality, but it's equity. On the glass ceiling, the complexity becomes, it has to be equality and it has to be diversity. So putting in and investing into this feeder pool and being able to identify, the future leaders, and then being able to groom them and take them, that's really the objective that we're currently focused on. And second, obviously, is, we would like to see this more closer to the population diversity ratio. As you go to other cultures, this is not the only diversity. Most of the developed economies and developed countries have moved far beyond gender diversity. Then when we look at inclusion, we must also look at differently abled people and including them as part of our colleagues and our partners.